Whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Okay, perfect. So can you see my screen and everything's all good?
You can see your screen, yeah, so you can just start with your introduction.
Awesome. Oh, okay. All right, so my theme is growing professional knowledge. I am Skyping in or Zooming in other words, from Houston, Texas, where is my current student teaching right now. My competency statement is I am competent at reflective practices to identify what I have left to learn to give students the opportunity to become proficient dual language speakers and learners. So the reasons for my competency statement, the first one is I realized reflective practices were critical to grow professionally. Reflective practices forced me to think about the delivery of my lessons and to learn from my experience, my colleagues and students to help the students be successful. It allows me to develop my skills in both languages to further my growth along with the growth of my students. The questions that are revolving around this is how do my students benefit from me identifying what I have left to learn? The second question is how does reflective practices look like for me? The other one is why is it important that I give instruction in both languages? So the evidence overview will be from my first placement, which was at Ruth Hill Elementary in Lincoln. It was third grade. My second piece of evidence will be taken from reflections from Lit and Math block, which was in second grade and kindergarten. And of course, my community learning center, which was kindergarten through fifth grade. The final piece will be student teaching, which is here in fourth grade at Leesman Elementary. So my first piece of evidence is taken from my first lesson plan, and this is when I was incompetent at my statement. As you can see here, this is a lesson plan that I created for my third graders, and it was for singular and plural nouns. There is no reflective practices at all. There is no usage of both languages. I just did everything in English. However, the only thing that I did create was in a PowerPoint. And so this was just kind of like I thought about, I'm like, oh, my kids should see a PowerPoint so they can visually see the word and hear it, but didn't necessarily reflect back on it or to see if students benefited from it or learned from it. And I had no conversation about it with my CT. So my approaching is my second piece of evidence, which is the reflections and lesson plans from Lit Block and Math Block in my community learning center. So the first piece is from my Lit and Math block. We started doing reflections and started saying, okay, we started writing like your professional growth. So it's like, how has this practicum experience you to grow? And then we started writing down and reflecting on what we thought and how we delivered the lesson. And I began having conversations to identify what I had left to learn from my practicum partner, which was Erica in kindergarten. And then we also started having the different assessments where this CT would be the one observing and everything. And so they would be helping me. So this is when I started kind of identifying what I had left to learn. Hand in hand with this is also my second grade was when I started incorporating the second language, which is Spanish. I started doing my unit and started using cognates. And this was just kind of something that I thought about, like, okay, you know, if my students understand the respiratory system, I could use the cognate, el sistema respiratorio, so that they can kind of start balancing or start helping them learn the different body systems and whatnot. And so this, I honestly thought was awesome because this is when I talked to my CT about it and she loved it and she encouraged me to continue developing that skill. And that's when I started also realizing that I was actually getting prepared for my lesson plans. I was using that reflective practices of how am I going to do this? What am I going to be doing? How is it going to look like? This is just kind of a little piece of evidence that I have, which is when I taught my reading lesson. And so I printed out the page of the story I was going to read and started really reflecting on how I was, or what I was going to do to assure my students' learning. The the second artifact that I used for this second piece of evidence was that during my CLC experience, I actually had a student who just came to the United States and had zero English, zero English. His parents didn't know anything. And so after talking to my supervisor and after, getting her help and saying, how are we going to do this? I was put in charge of the student. And so one of the projects that we did was we did holiday cards, and the holiday cards, of course, I had to do the instructions in English and everything. However, I had to turn back and backtrack and do everything in Spanish so that the student could complete the activity that we had for them. And right here you can see he tried to write Feliz Navidad, and of course the other one wrote Have a Happy Christmas. At the same time, this was all emerging because I started talking to my supervisor and how I can further my skills, and she started telling me, you have to start translating because all the students here, majority of them are Spanish speakers. And so this is kind of a little screenshot of a translation that I did for a summer camp for the school that I was working at. So as you can see over here, with this one is the English one, and then this one was the Spanish one. So after doing some reflective practices of saying, okay, what can we do to incorporate and make sure that all students take advantage of all of these activities that CLC has to offer, and we thought, well, we have to start translating this. So this is when these two start coming together, and this takes me to my third piece of evidence, which is my competent statement. When I became competent, in my statement here in student teaching. And so this is when I actually got placed in a dual language program, and I am now teaching English and Spanish. So this is just kind of a little screenshot of a lesson plan that I created in English and Spanish. So I had everything in English, and then right at the bottom I did it in Spanish. And then I ended up reflecting and realizing that the reflective piece isn't just about me thinking about how I'm going to be doing the lessons and talking to my CTs about it, but I started realizing that reflective practices also comes from the students. And so here is just a little piece, a tweet basically, that one of my students did for that particular lesson that I taught. And we reflected on it and we talked about it, like, okay, how does this benefit us? And so somebody was commenting that it was very important that the student who tweeted this out had drawn a picture of it so that they would know that they had to recycle and the renewable resources, So this is very, for me, a growth, just because I finally got to talk to the Spanish teacher, and she was the one who kind of said, okay, since this is your first lesson, this is what you're going to have to do. And she helped identify the different things that I had to do prior to teaching the lesson. This was also when I started kind of involving the different teachers within fourth grade to kind of like help me grow professionally. And I started realizing, reflective practices is not just me, it's not just the students, it's also, my colleagues and my CTs and what the other fourth grade teachers are doing. And so this is just kind of a video that we put together, myself and the fourth grade math lead, because we realized that students were struggling with the concept of improper fractions. And so parents started sending notes and saying, students are struggling with this. What can we do? And so, we sat down, we thought about it. And as a team, we said, we have to show the parents a way that they can explain improper fraction to their students. And so this is just kind of him, the math lead, actually talking about improper fractions. So he did the English part of it, and then I got the chance to put my 2 cents in and started kind of recording and explaining fracciones impropias, which is the Spanish side of it. So that's when I started saying, okay, this teacher, the math lead, helped me identify that, you also need to communicate with the parents in order to assure your student success. And of course, I had to do it in both languages. So he helped me with the English one, and then I did the Spanish one. So he helped me identify that missing piece, which is the reflective practices involving the parents. The other thing that I did was I wanted to have kind of a thing to see, or for the students to have that chance to also reflect on their learning, or if they have any questions or things that they could help me understand what I was missing. And so I created this parking lot right over here, and right beside it there's a sticky note with like a pencil, and the students are encouraged to go in and write it, and they're encouraged to ask questions or comments or things they're confused in. And so then they just go ahead and stick it up there, and then I get back to them and talk to them and let them know, okay, this is this and this is that. So the reflective piece, it was critical for me to kind of realize that the students also had a thing to say, and how I can further, or the things that I needed to go over and how I needed to learn to grow. So it was self-talk, and the reflective practices could be displayed in multiple ways, including in an email that was given to me, or sent to me, sorry, from one of the teachers who came to observe me. And because I asked her, can you come in here and can you come see what am I doing wrong, or what do I need to do to better myself as an educator? And so she just said, your lesson was well prepared. So I knew that I was doing something right. My synthesis here is the beginning, I wasn't doing anything, no reflecting, no talking to my CT or anything by any means. And then by the math block and lit block and community center, I actually started to identify what I had to learn and what I needed to do differently to assist students' understanding of activities and tasks in both languages. So I started to reflect on that too for my personal growth. And then it was up until here where I'm at right now, where I'm identifying what I had left to learn and what I needed to do by listening to my colleagues, students, parents, and myself to ensure that the students were getting the opportunity to become proficient dual language speakers and learners. And of course, in doing so, I'm helping prepare them for the 21st centuries, so that they can be prepared for what is to come. I also created different methods and form of using reflective practices, and not just journals or, self-reflecting, but it was much more than that, which takes me to my next point, my reflection. I have learned that dialogue is important for me to grow professionally and to become the best teacher I can be, so that the students are able to learn and become competent in not only in one language, but in two. I understand that reflective practices is an ongoing cycle and still have lots of things to learn and different ways to reflect, that reflective practices can be used. In the future, I will become a certified bilingual teacher, hopefully by the next academic school year, to become a dual language program teacher. And so I can do, if I do this, I'm going to be able to help my students further their growth in both Spanish and English. I will also continue to use reflective practices to perfect my lesson delivery and to identify the things I have left to learn. And I will do so by seeking advice from my colleagues, students, parents, and of course my own self-reflection to make sure that my students are successful. These are the overall pieces of evidence that I gathered. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Okay, Evelyn, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. Let's see, you do have a question?
I do.
Good.
Evelyn, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
How did you solicit reflection on behalf of students in order to adjust your lessons?
So one of the things that I did was I focused the parking lot that I have over here. You can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Trying to look. This parking lot, I started kind of reflecting, and I actually did not take pictures, but some of the students had sticky notes that said, I really liked how we used this video when you helped us understand this. And so, I realized, okay, technology is a huge part in their learning. And so I reflected on that. And when I was preparing my lesson plans, I would make sure to incorporate that technology.
Thank you.
Per se.
Do you have any questions, Diane?
I don't think I do.
You were
right
pretty
now.
thorough. I don't have
Yes,
anything
very thorough.
extra. Except I want to know what are you headed home soon, Evelyn? Or are you staying in Houston for a while?
I am fortunate enough to say that I have been offered a position here to teach in January.
Yay!
congrats.
So,
Yay, congratulations.
thank you so much.
Surprise, but okay, we're going to take a couple notes, and the next person is Jacqueline. Another
Perfect.
familiar face. Okay, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Oh, I'll stop the recording.
All right.